Okay, well, today I am so excited to welcome Carmen Amato to the Italian American Stories podcast. Carmen is an incredible author. She's wrote quite a few books, which we'll talk about today, a 30-year veteran of the CIA. So I'm just super excited to have you on the podcast. So welcome and thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm really looking forward to this. It's
Me?
always fun to talk about heritage.
It absolutely. Yep. And I completely agree. All right. Well, and so speaking of heritage, where is your family from in Italy?
My maternal um, side of the family is all from Serra San Bruno, which is a very small municipality in Calabria. And I had to look it up, but it is the uh, see, I had notes. Not something, my family really talked about very much. It's the province of Vibo Valentia,
Hmm.
with less than 9,000 residents, some of whom are monks in the famous Carthusian monastery called the
Wow.
Serra San Bruno Charter House. So it's a pretty small community, and my grandfather's parents came over um, around the turn of the 20th century, emigrated. The family name, um, my, let's see, should be my maternal great grandmother. My grandfather's mother was Marietta Caposacale,
Mm.
and and she married Sestito, both from that area. But then my grandfather, who was the oldest of their children, um, he was born in the U.S.
Okay.
and he married a woman, my grandmother, Anne, and her family was also from Serra San Bruno. And they
Wow.
were the Amatos, and both her parents' last name was Amato, although for years she spelled her father's last name in a French manner. Instead of Amato, she spelled it Amateaux.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's
So,
very interesting. I wonder why she did that.
well, we'll get to
We'll
that.
get to that.
We'll
Okay,
get to
perfect.
that.
We'll put that on the back burner for now.
Yeah. But they all ended up in Rome, New York, a very, as you can imagine, large immigrant Italian population, but also a very large Polish immigrant
Oh,
population. But they were attracted not only by great farmland, the dirt up there is just rich and black, and there's also a great waterway network. So you've got the Mohawk River and the
mm,
Erie Canal, and then a little further over the Hudson River. But you can go all the way from New York City to Buffalo staying on a waterway.
oh, cool.
And in fact, the Mohawk tribe of Native Americans in that area called Rome the carrying place because there was only a very small place where you had to get out of your canoe and carry it to the next waterway. So that was
Interesting.
the Dio Wayne stuff, they called it.
Okay.
But that whole area became very popular. Um, Copper and brass rolling mills, manufacturing, Revere, um, the genuine Paul Revere
Yeah.
developed a way of manufacturing copper, and the big Revere copper and brass rolling mill was the number one um, employer in that area for years. So my
Wow.
grandfather grew up in Rome, and his father worked at the Revere Mill. And after some escapades, including a stint as deputy sheriff of Oneida County, my grandfather worked at Revere, eventually rising up to be the deputy foreman of the entire mill.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's rich history in that area, it sounds like.
Rich history. So I grew up in Rome, where, it was kind of like Mayberry, but colder and Catholic. So if you were Irish, you went to St. Paul's Church. If you were Polish, you went to Transfiguration. If you were Italian, you went to St. John's. And the whole city kind of revolved around, the Catholic calendar. And I would say that the Italian population was definitely the largest in
Yeah.
town. So, I mean, the summer St. John's Festival was the big event of the year.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
it was a good place to grow up. It
I
was a good place.
bet.
Yeah.
Do they still do that festival there?
I think so, but
Okay.
it's not quite what it used to be.
Sure.
And
Yeah. That seems to be a trend with a lot of festivals.
unfortunately, yeah, and
Yeah.
they've closed several of the churches, and
Gotcha.
unfortunately, they had the city had or was struck by a tornado that actually ripped the roof off of St. Mary's Church, which had already been kind of
Mm.
decommissioned, but it's kind of sad to see,
Oh, for sure. It kind of blows me away about a tornado. I always think of tornadoes in the southern states.
It was a shock. It was a shock. And of course, I live in Tennessee now. The last time I was in Rome was a couple of months after that tornado. And, the devastation was shocking. It slammed right through the downtown area.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That's so crazy. So sad. All right. Well, speaking of Rome, New York and your background, why don't we dive into your new book series, the Galliano Club series? Because there's a little bit of history there that we could talk about. So do you want to talk to us? Yep. Oh,
Showcase
me
the
too.
cover. Oh, what an excellent choice of reading material you have there, Stephanie.
Summer reading right there.
Summer reading. Um, there's, you know, I was very lucky, 2019, to be inducted into the Rome Arts Hall of Fame.
Oh, very
And
cool.
it really was a lovely ceremony, to be honored by my hometown for contributions to literary um, life. But at that time, I had not written anything set in New York or, you know, regarding my Italian heritage. But one of the organizers of the Hall of Fame asked, would I ever write a mystery set in Rome? And, I said, maybe. Not really feeling very serious about it. But when the pandemic hit us, it was very difficult to keep writing my probably more well-known series, the Detective Amelia Cruz series. I didn't really want to write police procedural and drug cartels and uh, the issues that series deals with. And my mother was in lockdown in a senior uh, living center right outside of Rome, and she was feeling the isolation very keenly. So I would call every night and we'd talk about growing up in Rome
Mhm.
and different things from her past, very comforting kind of memories for her.
Sure.
So I decided, okay, I would take all those stories, plus all the stories my grandfather told about his experience being a deputy sheriff in Oneida County during Prohibition, the late 1920s, and I would create a book. And that book turned into four, which completes the whole Galliano Club. It's one narrative arc, an Italian family saga, or how that Italian family got started saga kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so Rome became the inspiration for the fictional city of Lido, New York in 1926, the Galliano Club, which is a real place. It still stands. I expanded it a little. Um, And there really was, when I was in high school and for several years afterwards, a dance studio on the second floor.
Oh, cool.
So the Galliano Club was a hangout for Italian men, and most of them were mill workers. And most folks either belonged to the Galliano Club or the Liberty Club right
Mm.
across the street. And my grandfather belonged to the Liberty Club, actually. But for 4 years during high school, I took dance lessons above the Galliano Club in the
Oh,
dance
cool.
studio. So I'm putting all these things together and created the scenario of the Italian immigrant who runs the Galliano Club versus the Chicago bootlegger who gets kicked out of town by Al Capone, comes to Lido because he has a cousin who lives there. And they start this rivalry, this battle for who will control the Galliano Club.
Mm,
Because on the one hand, it's the only home the Italian immigrant Luca Lombardo has ever known. On the other hand, it would be a great signature speakeasy for the bootlegger who someday wants to, put a sharp stick in Al Capone's eye.
gotcha.
Well, the murder, uh, we've got murder, and then of course we have blackmail, followed by revenge. And if you want to know the origin story of not only Luca the bartender, Benny the bootlegger, but also Ruth Cross, who lives on the second floor and runs the dance studio and witnessed the murder,
Oh,
then you've got the prequel of Road to the Galliano Club.
oh, nice.
So the uh, the books, were kind of my family labor of love during the pandemic. Unfortunately, my mom passed before she had the ability to actually, read or understand that the books were coming. We lost her to dementia.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Um, I understand that, you know, she would have been thrilled
Mm-hmm.
to see these stories. And she would have recognized many of these family stories in the books that I adapted into action, into, this historical fiction thriller series.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that's
A lot of
the
the people and probably places she would have, under like different places in the town and stuff. I'm sure she would have recognized that as well.
oh, absolutely. Um, there's the Bison Club where all the rich people in town belong to. Uh, that was the Elks Club, which is a gorgeous building in
Yeah.
town. I was able to use a lot of the landmarks, and in fact, the major Italian thoroughfare through the section of Rome that is heavily populated by the Italian community is known as East Rome, and the major street is Dominic Street.
Mm.
So I just transposed that into East Lido with the main street of Hamilton Street. And someone, one of the readers, emailed me and she said, every time I drive down Dominic Street, I think of you.
That's cool.
That was
Well, and that's the thing with places and buildings. They can become almost their own character in a book, especially when they mean so much to you.
it was just so much fun to make that transition, to take things that I remembered or things my grandfather told me or things my mother told me. Um, and especially having the ability to um, refer back to photographs. There's a lot of historical photographs of Rome to connect with the Rome Historical Society, the Oneida County Historical Society, to tour through these places that, okay, as a little kid I saw, but it really didn't make any impression.
Yeah.
And then now as an adult and as an author, looking at these places with a a bit of a different eye.
Yeah, a little bit more appreciative.
I was really lucky. I had a private tour of the Stanley Theater in Utica, New York, which the whole lobby is a scale version of the lobby of the Titanic.
Oh,
And it was,
wow.
yeah, it was built in the late 20s and it's just gorgeous. But little details like perforations in the floor so that cool air would rise to take the place of air
Of air
conditioning
conditioning.
in this theater. And, I was able to go backstage and look at how they moved sets before there was machinery to move the sets. And
Yeah.
so that was terrific. And then, of course, the best of all, I got a private tour of the West End Brewery in Utica, New York. So if
That's
anybody's
cool.
familiar with Utica Club beer, that was the first brewery to ship beer after Prohibition was done with in 1933. Um, but they managed to stay afloat by creating all these oddball drinks, some of which my characters are imbibing in the Galliano Club series. So,
Oh, cool. I like how you
yeah,
tie that in as well.
yeah, it was, I tried to be as correct and authentic as possible, and I think readers appreciated it. And I think that is the reason why Murder at the Galliano Club, the first full novel that you have, won the Silver Falchion Award for Best Historical of 2023. And the last book, Revenge at the Galliano Club, was nominated. It was a finalist for the same award last year.
Oh my
So,
gosh, very congratulations.
thank
That's
you. Thank
amazing.
you.
Yeah.
The books have been very well received.
Yeah, you were talking to me about there's a blog. I have the Inwood Out that has done a whole travel guide about your book, The Galliano Club.
Yes, I'm so appreciative. She did an interview with me and that travel guide, sort of, really showing um, the places and the influences in the book and where you can go today if you want to, get a really good cup of coffee in Utica.
Yeah, I just ordered your book. So that's my plan is to read that. But I pulled up that her blog, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna reference this blog as I'm reading to kind of wrap my head around the space of it.
Isn't that a great thing to be able
It
to do? I had never seen something like that before.
Oh, it truly is. I'm Colorado, so I can picture Colorado, I can picture Denver, Grand Junction. I know that space, but it's just so cool to pull that up and get an idea of it's like almost having like that spatial like aerial view in a sense to look at that. So yeah, your books have been very well received. You also have a knitting club that is a
Oh,
huge fan of your book, your book series.
I never expected anything like this, but I have a friend, Elizabeth Booth, who is a knitwear pattern designer, and this isn't knitwear like commercial clothing. It's specialty knitwear, and her patterns are available on a website called Ravelry. If you're a knitter or a crocheter, this is where you get those really fancy custom patterns to make at home. So I really had no idea. I am not a knitter. I'm not, I don't do any yarn crafts. Let's just say
Yeah,
that.
it's not my
I
thing
do
either.
sew and I do some quilting,
Oh,
but no
nice.
yarn. So she came to me. She had read the books and she said she wanted to make knitwear patterns out of the books. And I really had no idea what she was talking about, but I was like, sure, go ahead, whatever.
Why
Um,
not?
she teamed up with a yarn store owner and a custom yarn dyer.
Wow.
And not only did they create patterns based on the books, but also, and that's where I helped a little bit, came up with custom colors and then had the yarn dyed these custom colors and made a book club out of this. So it lots of moving parts and in the most creative way, but the book club kind of came coalesced around kits.
Hmm.
So the first kit readers got Road to the Galliano Club and Murder at the Galliano Club, crochet and knit patterns for making a hat and one of those eternity scarves, which has a copper thread woven through it
Mm.
to reflect the copper mills in the book. Um, Plus, some assorted knitting tool goodies and all. And then we had a launch party, and it's been a blast. We just debuted Kit 3, which wraps it up. And they got a copy of Revenge at the Galliano Club, plus knitwear patterns
Oh,
and
cool.
custom yarn. And each person who buys a kit can pick which color custom yarn they wanted from that particular offering. So then everybody came together at the yarn store last week, and they're all excited. I picked Hannah's hat band color, or I picked the Lucas Olive Grove's color, and so it turned out to be a big reveal each time.
Oh, cool.
So a big party to uh, give everybody their kits. Um, so, and then, we've got people who couldn't come. They're not in the area, so they're on Zoom and they're excited because their box got mailed to them and all. But it's been amazing and just wonderful enthusiasm around this idea. And we're trying to figure out, well, what now if people want kits, they can buy the patterns, but what if they want to buy a kit? So
Mm.
um, we'll have to figure that one out, or
Try
not
to
me,
make them
actually.
available.
Yeah, make them
Yeah.
available to keep because it's been just so popular to do this.
I just love that they pulled it from the book and then the color, like the copper. You were just telling us about
Mhm.
the copper, the mines and stuff. So having that color come through, and I can just almost picture them, reading their book and doing their patterns. I just think it's amazing.
I had no expectation of this being such a big deal or such fun. Uh,
Yeah.
but
It's kind of cool too because you get to see some of your characters' accessories, like their hats and stuff, come to
mhm.
life a little bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, and because the colors, the name of the colors connect, you get a real strong visual. Um, and I know that this blue, it's
Mm,
a little hard to show, but
yeah.
of the cover turned out to be the most popular color, I think, because people could, make that quick association. But
Sure.
um, yeah, that's been amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, it just shows how popular and how much they're loving your book. I mean, a knitting club has rallied around you.
This is true. This is true. I think when an author puts out a book and you want the reader to have an experience, you want them to really escape into this world.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily think about all the ways someone might want to use the book to enhance that reader experience. But
Absolutely.
yeah,
Oh,
just
so cool.
lots of fun. Lots of
Yeah.
fun.
So you talked about your grandfather earlier. And I was wondering if you would like to tell us a story, since we're the Italian American Stories podcast, perhaps about your grandfather. He sounds like a Pretty interesting guy.
My grandfather um, was a very interesting guy. My brother always says that if he ever wrote his own autobiography, it would start with "My heroes are cowboys and a certain Italian plumber," um, and that would be my grandfather. Um, he was, as I say, the oldest of I think seven children.
Oh, wow.
Um, Grew up in Rome and had maybe 2 years of school. After that, he was an apprentice to a barber. Well, he had a reputation for um, being kind of a tough guy. Um, and he would tell some stories about, you know, I wouldn't want to say wayward youth, but somehow he was big and he was tough. And he came to the attention of the sheriff of Oneida County, who's unfortunately I've forgotten his name. And he appointed my grandfather as deputy sheriff.
Hmm.
Um, and he had, I think, my grandfather had worked a little bit at Revere, copper and brass rolling mill, um, but um, definitely preferred the law enforcement route. So one of his jobs as deputy sheriff was to um, be the jailer in
Hmm.
the Oneida County Jail, which was in the basement of the courthouse in Rome. And at one point, he was transporting a prisoner, and the prisoner was drunk and unruly. My grandfather, of course, they didn't all have official vehicles back then. He was driving his brother's car and he drove it into a ditch.
Oh, no.
You know, uh, so we uh, we got some more stories, including my grandfather was um, told to go to the cemetery one night because bootleggers had conducted a mock funeral, and it appeared that they had put uh, bootleg whiskey or whatever in the casket and buried it. And the assumption was that they would come back to get it. Now, you might not, as I said before, Rome is surrounded by great water transportation routes, Erie Canal, Mohawk River, and it's a very rural community, or at least it was back then. So that made it a great place for private stills, and
Hmm.
people had stills um, in their barns, basically. So, to say that they were bootleggers walking around and conducting mock funerals and burying their liquor, not such a far-fetched idea.
No. Fascinating, but not far-fetched.
So my grandfather, was told to go to the cemetery and wait for the bootleggers. And when they came to dig up the casket and get their hooch back, he should arrest them. Well, my grandfather did not want to be in the dark cemetery alone. So he asked his best friend, Hank Rizzuto, whose son John would eventually become head of the fashion house Givenchy for the US. Well, Hank, great friend, sold insurance. So possibly not the most, you know, um, law enforcement type that you'd want
Yeah.
to take with you. Well, but my grandfather had to go, so they went to the cemetery and cold night and wind whistling through the darkness and the headstones, and they are crouching down, waiting for the bootleggers to come, and creepy night, and they're waiting 10 minutes. My grandfather decided if the bootleggers came, they were welcome to their
He was
liquor.
like, I'm done.
I'm done. And they left.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. There's he also had a big chunk taken out of his shin bone.
Ooh.
Always remembered seeing this big, maybe about the size of my thumb,
Oh my
chunk taken
gosh.
out of the bone. Um, and a prisoner had kicked him
Oh,
wearing a steel-toed boot, must have broken his leg,
yeah.
and the took out a big chunk of bone out of his leg. So,
Oh my God. He must have kicked, I mean, still toed boots alone, but he must have kicked pretty hard to take that much out. That's
yep,
crazy.
yep, that's crazy.
Wow.
I used that episode. Well, I used all the episodes. So you'll find the cemetery scene in Blackmail at the Galliano Club. You'll find the famous kick and what my grandfather did, because he actually makes a cameo appearance in the last book in Revenge at the Galliano Club, and a
Cool.
prisoner kicks him, and let's just say my grandfather didn't tolerate that. In fiction, I doubt he did. In real life,
In
either.
real life too. All right. So grandfather shows up a little bit in the book, the last one.
He does. He
Very
does.
cool.
As the jailer in
Awesome.
the basement of the courthouse. Yeah.
That's cool. It's a really cool way to have your grandfather kind of continue to live on in your books. Those little stories and memories.
He wasn't much of a reader,
Yeah.
beyond the Rome Daily Sentinel, but I think he would get a kick out of appearing in the book and taking the action that he does.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
So.
very cool. Awesome. All right. So, can we hear the mystery about the French spelling about a mod with a motto?
Um, well, that involves my grandmother, so the long-suffering wife of the deputy sheriff of Oneida County, um, which I didn't mention. On their wedding night, they had a big reception in Rome, and two of the wedding guests got into a dispute, and one of them killed the other,
Ooh.
and then took off. And so my grandfather was called out as the sheriff and all the deputies fanned out looking for this guy. So, what a way to start your married life, right?
Right? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So, my grandmother, Anne, both of her parents' last name was Amato, um, but she always used the French spelling. She claimed that she was half French and that her father was French. And after she passed away, we learned that that was not at all the truth, that her father, Giuseppe Amato, the same as my spelling, um, he had murdered both his wife and a neighbor in 1912 in Hartford, Connecticut.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. Um, so this was a big shock. My
Yeah.
sister uncovered it doing some genealogical,
Genealogical. That's a tricky word.
genealogical,
Genealogical, yeah.
genealogical research, looking for death certificates from Hartford, Connecticut, and was referred to the police department, which holds all death certificates for murder victims.
Okay.
So her father had been in the US for about 6 years, I think. There was five children in the family, and the mother, Carmela, was pregnant with the sixth, and they lived in an apartment in the Italian, what the newspapers called the Italian colony
Hmm.
in Hartford, Connecticut. Um, Unbeknownst to any of the family members, he sold his barber shop, which was in the basement of the tenement on Spruce Street in Hartford, and used the money to buy an automatic handgun. And he gave his name to the seller of the handgun. He gave the name of the person who had bought the barbershop.
Mm.
So he didn't use his own name. He also took down a picture of himself that was in their apartment, which I guess was about the only picture of himself.
Yeah.
And, so it's a little murky as to motive, but his neighbor, uh, whose last name was Tassone, seemed to be a very volatile and aggressive man whose wife had tried to leave him and he had hired a private detective to bring her home.
Oh, wow.
So, was this a dispute? Because Tassone was known to have a gun and keep it in his apartment. But whatever happened that night, the my great grandfather. So once again, this is my maternal grandmother's father. Um, he and his wife were in their apartment. The Tassoni husband and wife were there as well, and dispute ensued. And Giuseppe Amato, my great grandfather, shot Giovanni Tassone. When the two wives attempted to intervene, he shot both of them as well
Gosh.
and then took off. So he was last seen running towards the railroad tracks in Hartford. He dropped the gun at some point, which it was discovered the next day in another neighborhood. And he was never seen again.
Oh my gosh. I
Yeah.
wonder where he went.
That is the big mystery.
Oh
So
my gosh.
after that, Tassone dies. Um, Carmela, my great grandmother, she lingered for 3 days and died in the hospital. And Tassone's wife recovered, and
Okay.
we kind of lost her story through the years.
Through the years.
Yeah. So can you? There was a big manhunt, um,
Wow.
but he was never found.
Is there it makes you wonder, did he stay in the States and change his name? Did he go back to Italy? I mean,
Really? I mean, in
wow.
those days, your identification was pretty sketchy.
Yeah.
Um, but he had also, Giuseppe Amato, my great grandfather, he had also lied on a survey
Mm.
um, as to what his name was and how many kids he had. And he gave a fake name. So that was like a little before the shooting. So, acting in an uh,
Uh,
odd way. It's hard to know exactly, did he do it to avoid a fee because he was a barber and um, apparently Hartford was issuing licenses, something of
yeah.
that nature. Um, so yeah, that was a
Oh my
big
God.
surprise, big shock
Yeah,
to
because you
find
found that
that
out
out.
after your grandmother died.
Yes,
Okay.
but it does answer the question. She would have been about 5 at the time of the shooting, and as far as we know from news reports, all of the children of Giuseppe and Carmela Amato were in the apartment when Giuseppe shot the neighbor.
Oh, geez.
So potentially she witnessed that
Yeah.
shooting and then through the years decided that she would distance herself from it by changing the spelling of the name and insisting that her father was French. And for as long as, uh, you know, she was alive, she maintained that her parents had gone back to Italy when she was 5 and they died in a train wreck.
Oh my gosh.
And of course, that wasn't true.
Yeah,
But was that the story that she had developed to distance herself from what a horrible thing had happened that she did?
absolutely. Because she
So,
was very young, but she may have some memories still, and that was her
absolutely.
way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
Whoa, that was fascinating.
Yeah. And my grandmother never knew her birthday. She
Oh,
never, so much had been lost for her by that crime, and now everybody knows why.
yeah,
But
absolutely. Oh my gosh. And then to find it out after she passes, like, because then you're probably like, oh, I
yeah,
could ask her so many questions. Whether or not she would talk about it, that's another thing.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
I don't think we would have been able to get her back to that childhood memory.
yeah.
I
No, that makes sense. Oh
think
my
she would have
gosh.
wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I don't
But,
think so.
no, but I always wondered if my grandfather, deputy sheriff for so many years, if he knew,
Mm,
if he knew that his absent father-in-law, was a double murderer.
right? And on the
Um,
run.
and on the run, I mean, who knows where he ended up?
Yeah, it would be interesting to know if he knew or if she kept that a secret from him as well, or if
But
he figured it out on his own.
I figured that she probably kept it a secret from him. I
Yeah,
could see that, but would he have known? Because it was in the news, but that was 1912, and they didn't
sure.
get married until 1927. So,
Yeah. Well, and being in law enforcement, maybe he
yeah,
figured it
yeah,
out in his own way. You never know.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you for telling us that story. That makes me want to dive into it a little bit, see if I can find some newspaper articles.
I I was able to find quite a bit in newspapers.com.
Okay.
They had the Hartford Courier, I think it was called, or Current. And but it was reported in newspapers along the eastern seaboard all the way to Washington, D.C.
Wow.
But at the same day as the shooting, it was July 1912, there was another crime in Pennsylvania committed by someone with the last name of Amato.
Mm.
And so
Same day?
I'm looking at this going, wait, who?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have not dug into that second Amato crime, wondering if that's related. It's a bit of a common name, I think, yeah, from
Yeah.
Calabria.
And this happened on the same day or the same month?
The same day.
Holy smokes.
Yeah,
That
it
is
was
so
surprising.
bizarre.
Yeah. So it kind of muddied my research for a little bit.
Yeah, because you've got
Um,
to discern, especially if your family story was told in newspapers along the coast, then
mhm.
you've got to kind of weed that out a little bit. Oh,
Exactly.
gosh, that's
Exactly.
so crazy. Oh, those family stories, they are so fascinating.
They are so fascinating, and I am sure it's not limited to Italian families, but it
Yeah,
always is very interesting to hear, uh, you know, distant relatives and their family stories and different things that have happened.
especially when you like unravel a secret that you didn't even know was there.
That's true. That's
Yeah,
true. Um,
absolutely. Well, what are your next projects that you have going on? Do you have any other books that you're working on or other projects?
Well, right now I am working on the 10th book in the Detective Amelia Cruz
Mm,
series, which is the series that most pulls on my experience being an intel officer with the CIA for 30 years. She's the first female police detective in Acapulco. So I spent a lot of time dealing with technical intelligence collection issues, and counter drug issues.
okay.
So both of those um, figure into the series, but it's a contemporary police procedural series. So I'm working on number 10.
Oh my gosh.
But I'm really loath to leave the Galliano Club series behind. It's been such a connection to family.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Maybe you'll have some suggestions for me how I can get back to Lido, New York, and that wonderful cast of characters.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Maybe I'll if there's some way to do something else with that setting and bring in the Galliano Club. I'm
Yeah. Like a
uh,
spin-off in a way,
a
sort of.
spin-off, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh,
Whether
cool.
it's a short story or a companion series. Um, I, I had always planned it to be the three books, so the prequel was just an added bonus. Um, and the storyline wraps
Hmm.
right very nicely at the end of the third full novel. So I don't know what else to
To
do.
do. Yeah. Well, this is my reading series for this summer, so I will get through these books and send you my thoughts for sure.
Okay,
I'm
that
super
that'll be good.
excited, especially
When
now
I
that it's fun to go in there having like that little bit of background and look for the certain landmarks and characters and stories. It'll be really fun.
well, it'll if I do something else, it probably will have to be about beer again, because beer was what made Al Capone so rich. It wasn't
Yeah,
the bathtub gin. It was beer for thirsty mill workers.
that's
So
cool.
I might have to stick with the beer theme in another series, which is pretty good, you know.
Yeah, people liked beer then, people like beer
And
now. I
now,
mean, it spans the decades.
decades, that's right. One of
Definitely.
those universal timeless themes. Beer.
Beer, exactly. You can't beat it.
Yes.
All right. Well, would you like to tell our readers where they can find you, where they could buy your books, and links? And I'll post all of this in the show notes as well. So,
Oh, well, the first place to go is carmenamato.net, which is my website, and you can learn more about me, my books, my newsletter, which is called Mystery Ahead, and it comes out every 2 weeks, every other Sunday. So I try not to inundate folks with emails, but every other Sunday you get my top secrets, an excerpt of what I'm writing now, and a book review of something I really loved, genuine uh, mystery or thriller, and that I think you'll love too.
cool.
So, carmenamato.net. Other than that, you can reach me on Facebook, facebook.com/author Carmen Amato. You can find me, author Carmen Amato, on Instagram as well. Um, I've been posting a lot of behind the scenes reels on Instagram lately, so
Hmm.
that's always fun if you're a reader or a writer to get that background um, moments. Um, and let's see.
Where could they buy your books?
Can buy the books on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or Books a Million or wherever you buy print books online. And if you are a Kindle reader, you can get the books as ebooks on Kindle.
Oh, great. That's perfect. Yeah, there's a lot of people that like having that option.
Absolutely. And
So,
I did something uh, special for Kindle Unlimited readers, and that's an ebook box set of
oh,
all four Galliano Club books that you can get as one for Kindle Unlimited.
you just go right through them.
Just go right through them. Yeah,
That's perfect.
yeah. If you
Great.
need to binge, that's the way to do
That's
it.
the way to do it. Yep. I'll binge it, but I'm a paper girl. I like to hold that book. So I'll binge it with the books.
I love paper as well, but I know that so many love those box sets.
Absolutely. Especially if you're traveling a lot or
Mhm.
stuff, it's just nice to have all of that right there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice.
All right, Carmen. Well, thank you again so much for coming on the Italian American Stories podcast. It was so great to have you. And listeners, go out and buy her books. They, represent our Italian heritage and get to learn a little bit about that area up there and dive on in. So, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Stephanie. Thanks for letting me ramble on about the Galliano Club books and knitting and my grandfather. I truly appreciate any chance to chat about my Italian heritage and how much it means to me to have grown up with those values.
Absolutely. Well, I enjoyed hearing all of those stories. So,
Thanks again.
all right. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.